Hi guys, Will here, and today I'll be reviewing the GoPro Hero 8 Black. I've been spending the past few weeks testing out all its features in both photo and video taking. So today I'll be giving you guys some insight into what the GoPro Hero 8 does well and some of its downfalls. Before we get started though, here's some of my favorite clips I've taken with the camera so far.
Want a bit of energy food?
Design-wise, the Hero 8 has quite a small pocketable form factor as well as a grippy rubber textured body. The lens is quite large in comparison and a microphone is positioned right beneath. On the side of the camera you have the mode button to switch between time-lapse, video and camera modes, and a long press will power the camera on and off. And there's also an additional microphone right beneath the mode switch to pick up more sound. The other side has a detachable battery door which pops off quite easily, and inside is the battery, SD card slot and USB-C port. Underneath is two mounting fingers which make it easy to attach to a wide range of GoPro accessories. Once the mountings are extended, they reveal a speaker which is used to play back the audio from the footage, which is reasonably loud given its size. The main mountings I used was the helmet mount for mountain biking as well as the Chesty for running and hiking. I also used the Chesty mount on my dog, which is probably like a medium-sized dog. He's a Staffy. So the Chesty mount you could probably use on medium-sized and larger dogs, but it's not very well suited for smaller breeds. The touchscreen on the rear is responsive and has a clear display to show what's in frame for each shot. On top, there's a large button for recording and taking photos, which I found to be reasonably easy to operate whilst holding onto the camera with a single hand. To test how long the battery lasted, I did a battery rundown test with the camera set to continuous recording at 4K 60 frames a second with high bitrate recording at 100 megabits per second, GPS and wireless enabled. The 1200 mAh battery lasted 50 minutes before completely running flat, which I guess is to be expected given its micro size. And in case you owned other previous models of GoPro, all those batteries are compatible with the Hero 8. But there are some features that will be disabled, like hyper smooth stabilization set to boost and a few other features. The ways that you can make the battery last a little bit longer are disabling things like the GPS, recording lights, and also making sure that when you power down the GoPro, it completely switches off, because by default, it sets itself to like a standby mode when you power it down. And believe it or not, this does use quite a bit of battery when you're not using the camera. The reason it's like this by default, I think, is to make sure that you can have the camera ready. As soon as you hit the record button, it powers up and it's ready to go. But by changing this simple feature, you'll definitely get a little bit extra out of each battery. But if you do plan on using the GoPro to record for like a full day, I would recommend investing in a couple extra batteries just to make sure that you don't run out completely. Onto the Hero 8's features now, with Hypersmooth definitely being a standout. What it basically does is removes any kind of shakiness in the footage whilst you're recording video, eliminating any kind of need for a gimbal whilst you're recording. I found that out of the 4 different stabilization settings, Hypersmooth set to on worked really well whilst only applying a 10% crop to the frame, which allowed me to get everything I still wanted into the shot without cropping the footage too much. I took some footage side by side with stabilization turned on and off to give you an idea of just what it does whilst you're recording. The second most noteworthy feature is time warp, which allows you to capture time lapses in 4K and switch between the sped up time lapse and real-time recording. To do this, you simply tap the screen and it slows the footage right down to focus in on what you're recording on. I found this gave you a lot more flexibility whilst you're recording a time lapse. Instead of the old traditional way of just setting up a scene and letting the time lapse play through, you can really focus in on what you're recording whilst moving around. There's also 4 digital lenses to capture the best view of exactly what you're up to, including a super wide 16mm, wide 16 to 34, a linear 19 to 39, and a narrow 27mm. For me, keeping it on super view, which uses the 16mm lens, was great for capturing both the activity and some of the scenery to add to the overall shot. And people forget that GoPro was originally a camera that only took photos with no capability for video. So it's amazing how far they've come. When taking photos with a GoPro, it's definitely not as powerful as some of the flagship smartphones out there, but with the 12 megapixel camera, it's got some nice presets such as HDR, which removes motion blur, and Super Photo, which instantly enhances both the detail and sharpness of the images you get. There's also the ability to shoot in RAW, which a lot of series photographers out there will appreciate for the extra flexibility it provides in post. These images were shot in RAW to give you an idea of how you can enhance them using Photoshop to allow you to give the image your own personal touch and look you were going for. Live Burst is another feature similar to what you get on your smartphone, where you can take a lot of images in a very short amount of time. In this case, it takes 90 images, recording 1.5 seconds before you push down on the shutter button and 1.5 seconds afterwards. You can scrub through each of those 90 images and pick out the perfect moment that you want. You can also share that 3-second video in 4K resolution. Along with the capability of recording time lapses in 4K, as well as the time warp function, there's also a night lapse mode. I tested this out while I was doing some digging in the backyard, and as the sun came up, it captured the changes in light conditions pretty well. I did record it in 1080p. This is before I knew the different recording limits for the camera itself. When shooting videos, I was impressed with GoPro's color profile. It does well in accurately representing what the eye sees, and especially in well-lit conditions when the camera senses getting a lot of light. The sky looked vibrant, the trees and grass, and even people's skin tone was almost spot on. For more serious video creators though, they're probably going to want to shoot in the flat color profile for that extra flexibility in post, similar to shooting RAW when you're taking photos with a GoPro. The internal microphone picks up decent quality audio, but even though they say there is auto wind reduction, I noticed when mountain biking that even though I had it set to auto, you could still hear the wind quite predominantly throughout the footage. Another point to keep in mind is that when you're taking a time warp feature time lapse, the audio seems to be cancelled out. So if you switch from time lapse to real time and you're trying to capture a special moment, there won't be any audio whatsoever. But who knows, maybe there'll be an update in the firmware that will fix this. The display on the back is really easy to see and responsive, and the menu system itself is really easy to navigate. Quite a few issues that previous GoPro owners have had is knowing which settings to set the camera to for different shooting situations. GoPro's made it really easy now with a number of presets to quickly switch between while you're shooting. I found the activity preset was great for any kind of activity or action sport where you're moving around a lot. It really stabilizes the footage well. It films in a resolution of 2.7K instead of 4K, so that means smaller file sizes too. The other 3 presets include a 1080p 60, a slow-mo 1080 at 240 frames a second, which is a lot of fun, and a 4K 30, which is a more cinematic look. One thing I would change about the custom presets though, is the ability to be able to name them whatever you want. This is because each custom preset comes with a predefined name and you can't manually change it. So say you wanted a bike preset with something slightly tweaked, whether it be a nighttime, low light shoot or daytime in different frames per second, you can't custom name each individual one. And this would make it really easy to be able to identify them super fast and super easily while you're out on the trails or in another situation. Voice control is also a handy feature and it supports up to 14 different voice commands. When I was testing it out, I found that the GoPro start, stop recording, take a picture, start a time lapse, those ones all seem to work pretty consistently, but there's a number of them that don't work at all or are very hit and miss. GoPro, shoot burst. GoPro, video mode. GoPro, turn off. But I can see if you're in a precarious situation trying to take a photo, how these voice commands can really come in handy. The Hero 8 Black will record up to 4K 60 frames per second. Hypersmooth boost though is unavailable when it's recording at this setting. 4K 30 though, you can turn boost back on, which is pretty neat. There is also the option to record at 100 megabytes per second, which is great for capturing the best possible quality in the video, but there is a slight trade-off in bigger file sizes. And if you want the best possible quality footage, shooting in a flat color profile with low sharpness will give you the most customization in post to produce a really high quality video. For those diving enthusiasts out there, this will go down to a depth of 10 meters underwater. Any deeper than that, and you'll want the Enclosure accessory, which allows you to go down to a depth of 60 meters. And you can even live stream to YouTube, Facebook Live, or Twitch, but not yet Instagram, as it hasn't been enabled yet on the platform. So far I've covered all the good parts and features about this camera, but there are some downsides too. The first one being the battery door. I think it detaches way too easily from the camera, and to remove the battery itself, it's got this little plastic tab, which just seems way too basic for this camera. And that leads us to the SD card. It's definitely in a tight to reach spot, and you need some pretty good finger dexterity to actually access it. You can't remove the SD card itself without first pulling out the battery, which I think is a little bit counterintuitive. Secondly, the menu system did freeze up on me a couple of times while I was using the camera, and especially when I was in the photo burst mode, taking pictures at 12 megapixels, I had to power down the camera and turn it back on again, and even then the images hadn't processed and saved to the SD card, which was a bit of a bummer. Another downside is that you can't easily replace the lens cap like you could on previous GoPro models. There is, however, a lens protector kit that you can get from GoPro for $20 that is a protective film for both the front lens and rear LCD screen. If you're super worried about the GoPro itself, even though it's quite a rugged camera, you can buy a complete protective enclosure for $80 as an added accessory. And apart from those couple of points, the Hero 8 performed really well for what I was using it for. The lens captures a really nice sharp image, and that high bitrate recording in both 2.7K and 4K make it an ideal pocketable action camera. The GoPro audio and light mods available make it a lightweight option for vloggers too, so it's well worth considering if you're looking for a super lightweight setup for vlogging. All in all, this is definitely an impressive little camera for taking traveling or on an adventure, with some powerful features that will serve anyone looking to up their video game and still be able to take really nice images. The thing to consider is if a GoPro has a place in between a more expensive DSLR and a smartphone. I think for shooting outdoor activities or action sports, that's what GoPro does really well at. It's got great stabilization, and yes, the battery life isn't great, but when you consider how much battery the smartphones will burn through when they're shooting in 4K, it's around about on the same level playing field. DSLRs definitely run up a higher cost, so you have to keep that in mind as well. What makes GoPro so good is its small form factor. It's definitely known for being a rugged built camera, and the images and video it can produce is impressive. I can easily recommend this to anyone looking for a small pocketable camera to take whilst traveling. You can get some really interesting shots in point of view as well, in whatever sport you're into, and not having to worry about any shakiness in the footage. There'll be a link to the Hero 8 down in the description below, along with some of the accessories I used. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to leave it a like and subscribe for more tech videos in the future. I'll see you in the next one.